I'm doing well. How have you been?
Great.
Excellent. So, Nikki, I'll let you take it away, and from time to time, I might chime in.
Okay, so I guess first start with your background, your education, and kind of how you got into the role that you're in currently.
Well, Nikki, basically, I grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts, which was around 20 miles west of Boston, and kind of grew up in a suburban area and started playing sports probably when I was 11 or 12. That's a little late by today's standards. And then eventually ended up playing high school lacrosse, which I ended up playing in college, and then club ball, then professional for a while in what was then called the Major Indoor Lacrosse League. If I can tell a quick story about two different things that kind of defined why I do what I do now, probably was when I was 11 years old, and my father asked me to, asked if I wanted to be in a road race in Framingham, and it was a July 4th road race, and I was really excited about it, and I had done some running. It was a 3-mile race. I had never run that much in my life, and so we got to the starting blocks, and everybody else was like 20 years old or over, and I was this little 11-year-old skinny kid, and I could feel all my hands go cold and clammy, and total fear of failure. This is not good here. But I looked over at my father, and he just smiled at me, and that smile said everything. That smile really told me that, hey, it's okay whether you go with it or you don't go with it. So I went with it. The starter's gun went off. I took off. I came in dead last. The parade almost caught up to me. And then eventually, I realized out of that, it was my father's, what he didn't say was all of support of really, hope and confidence and resilience and optimism. And I've really carried that with me as an athlete, and more so as a coach and when I work with teams. My other story happened when I was a senior in college, at least eligibility wise. That was a kind of a sore subject with my parents back then. But picture me with brown hair down to my shoulders, parted in the middle, headband, doing the peace sign. And that was me. And when I was playing at Boston State College, which is now UMass Boston, we were playing in our first game of the season against Bowdoin College. And Boston State is around 3 miles away from our home field, which was in Brighton, Massachusetts. It was a town field that was adjacent to Harvard athletic fields. So Harvard's pristine athletic fields, and our field was dirt, a little glass on it, broken glass, and some grass, and that was it. So we got there. I got in the game, was really excited about it. I was a lacrosse goalie, so some people call us courageous, some people call us stupid. But anyways, I got out there and I played absolutely awful to the point where I wish the coach could have taken me out. Well, and basically my backup goalies weren't ready for prime time, so I stayed in there. So I went back to the dorms afterwards and actually grieved for a couple of days, because that was my identity at that time. And for so many athletes around that age, or at any different age, that becomes so much a part of you. But there was redemption on Thursday. My hope was, because we were playing Middlebury College from Vermont. They were coming down to Smithfield. We got out there, and so we're out there. We're a bunch of hippies out there, and the guys from Middlebury are all clean cut, especially their head coach, who was a huge guy who had a high and tight haircut, and he was really, barking out instructions. And so one of our guys on our team, Ronnie and Jemmy, he shaved half his beard off before the game to pump us up. Now, I'm not sure what that was about, okay, back then, but anyways, we get out there, and the first shot of the game goes in on me. And so I said, it's okay, I'm okay. Second shot goes through my legs. Then the drunken monkey in the back of my head started thinking, oh no, this is not good. I'm an imposter. I really do suck. This is no good. And so fortunately, the other team, Middlebury, got the ball again. They came in, and I made a great save at that time. Probably didn't expect to do it. Passed the ball down, cleared the ball down. We scored the goal. We scored the next goal. We scored the next 4 goals after that. We win the game 6-2. The ball was like a beach ball. And so I was in what we'd call today the zone. But that's not why I tell you the story. The reason that really influenced me in my coaching and working with teams happened in the second period, when the coach of the other team, Rob Pfeiffer, called for a timeout. And he said, timeout, Middlebury. And Middlebury players went dutifully to their bench, or into my bench, our bench. And remember Ronnie with half a beard? He runs to the Middlebury bench. So there's definitely something wrong with Ronnie. He goes through the crowd in the huddle, and these Middlebury guys don't know what to make of it. Ronnie jumps on the coach's back of the other team, okay? And the coach turns around. Ronnie takes off his helmet, half a beard. They look up at each other. They smile, and then they both begin to tear up and cry and hug each other. Say, what's going on here? Well, the backstory. When Ronnie heard Pfeiffer's voice call timeout, the last time he heard that tone, that inflection of that voice was 6 years before in the jungles of Vietnam, because Pfeiffer was his platoon commander. And everything stood still. To this day, I'm friends with guys on the other team because of that moment. And that was one of the greatest, sports moments I've ever had in my life. Basically, it was a collaboration of both teams working together. I think of that in the UCLA and Gonzaga players hugging each other after the semifinal game in the Final Four because of what they went for in the collaborative effort. So I've always kind of inculcated that and stayed with that in all the work that I've done, as in my work in leading teams and in leading coaches. So that's a little bit about my background.
Now, do you have a college degree? Where did you go to college, and kind of how your career has evolved as well?
I went to, as I said, Boston State College, which is now UMass Boston. Got a master's from Worcester State a couple of years after that in health education, kind of health behavior. Then eventually I earned my doctorate at EDD at Boston University. And I got a chance to work with teams at Boston University and Northeastern University also in Boston that time. The degree that really resonated most with me is back in 2005, 2006, I was in the inaugural class for applied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And that was really, really powerful. And, positive psychology is about not what the problem is and how do you fix it, what's already good in all of us, and how do we bring that out? And it has so many connections and bearings to sports psychology today. So that's my kind of education. I worked in the Framingham schools in Massachusetts for a while, eventually worked at Boston University. And then in 2000 came out to Indiana, in the cornfields of Indiana, around 2 hours. And Nikki knows this, 2 hours southeast of Chicago, probably in the middle of nowhere, to the Culver Academies, which is a rigorous independent boarding school. And I coached lacrosse for a while there, but I also worked in teaching health behavior, and I was a wellness educator there, and also our director for the Center for Character Excellence. All at the same time, I've really enjoyed working and going out working with other teams. And, I still have a lot of the teams that I work with are in New England, just because I had my roots there, but also some teams in the Midwest.
I just want to go back to that story you were talking about with the particular lacrosse game where it started to come together for you as a goalie. How's that shaped how you deal with teams now, as far as getting them kind of, maybe past that, oh shoot, it's happening again type of moment to, okay, I've got to collect myself and go back out and perform?
I mean, it means everything. The prime mover behind that is helping athletes who have this, fear of screwing up and fear of failure, which is so common out there, is to what are the strategies that one can use for being in the present moment. I'm on a podcast tomorrow, and the person who's a host is a golfer, so I know we'll be talking about the Masters, and when I was watching some of the previews of the Masters today, they say, well, wait till tomorrow when it really starts. The practice rounds don't really count. And that when they put the pin placement tomorrow, and how can you be there, and how can you best deal with being mindful and being in the present moment and having a strategy, be able to visualize yourself performing well. because in many ways we have good movies, bad movies, and horror movies in our mind from our sports experiences. And it's what we can call upon. And so neuropsychologically, if we're calling upon something that went well, or we can imagine something going well, there's a greater chance that our body will follow with that. So I use this, I use this all the time when I work with athletes and with coaches too.
How much do you think sports psychology, or just kind of learning things like, good leadership, team cohesion, in all these great attributes that we talk about in sports psychology, how big of a difference do you think it makes on a team? Is it something, because we kind of hear it, in the culture, is it something that can take like a 6-win team to a 20-win team? Or is it something that, hey, it's going to do a better job of kind of bringing a team together and get you a little bit more prepared to perform at your peak
I think
level?
it has a little to do with both. I mean, it always, I remember working with one basketball team who had, it was at Culver, who they had, probably 8 years ago, they had won their, they had come to the state semifinals and lost that. And then all but one player graduated. And then they went 0-23 the next season. And they still had the same frame of going out there every day. They just didn't have the talent. So of course you need to have the talent. But I think by having a level of what I call individual and collective psychological capital within the team, is really important. What I mean by that is psychological capital is different than human capital, which are the knowledge and the skills that the players and the coach have. And there's social capital out there, and it's the ability, the capacity to relate to each other. But psychological capital individually is about hope, confidence, resilience, and optimism. And then if individuals can work on that, they can eventually work on that and doing that collectively, and really kind of, help and work in putting together the jigsaw puzzle there. And I think it's incumbent upon the responsibilities and the opportunities of the coaches, okay, who drive the bus there, to make sure that's coming out in the athletes there. And they, and so therefore I think it can take teams, maybe not from 6 wins to 20 wins, but it can really help and enhance the quality of life there, in the joy and satisfaction, and not looking over your shoulder, so that it could maybe allow for athletes to be more in the present moment, so that they can perform better in a game, and then basically, get the W that comes out of it there.
Well, I think it's an important point, because we have a lot of students here. We're a big athletic school. Almost about half of our students are athletes. Yeah. And we've got a number of them who want to go into coaching. And I think they're really good with the technical skills. They understand how to draw up an offense against a 2-3 defense in basketball, right? They're really good at that. But if coaches are responsible for the ones kind of cultivating that culture and helping athletes perform their best, not just physically, but kind of mentally as well, are we doing enough as higher ed institutions, or even just in sports, to prepare coaches for that? Because I know when I coached college basketball for a number of years, I had no clue. And it wasn't until I went through grad school that I started understanding, oh my gosh, you were the worst coach in the history of basketball, as I start learning this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon coaches, if they want to be as effective as possible, and if they want to make as much of a difference as possible in athletes, in the teams, as working with Kevin Terrell, who's the Harvard men's swimming and diving coach, they've actually propelled themselves to the top of the Ivies the last 4 or 5 years. Of course, they didn't have a season this past year with COVID, but also to get up to high as ranked as number 12 in the country nationally. But he also believes that he wants his athletes to leave with a set of life skills to lead. And those are not diametrically opposed. It's a dynamic polarity or a dynamic balance with that. And part of that is knowing how to cultivate connections with the athletes in ways that you build trust. And I'm talking about vulnerability trust, where coaches are okay to say, hey, I screwed up here, okay? So it allows for the athlete to be more comfortable and not have that fear of failure as much. Because some of that fear of failure usually starts way back, and it's never addressed. You know, it's never addressed at home. It's never addressed on the athletic field, and you just say you got to live with it. And I don't think you have to. And I think there's enough information out there for coaches who really are lifelong learners, okay, to be able to go out there and cultivate those connections, you know, be able to show empathy, but also rational compassion. And rational compassion is about, you know, holding athletes accountable for some different things, but at the same time caring about them no matter what, unconditionally. And the third is mattering. You know, mattering, that every athlete tends to matter. You know, Catherine DiLorenzo, who's the women's field hockey coach at Middlebury College in Vermont, she talks about a scope of contribution, that all of her athletes know each other and they know themselves. And it's really important for that. And they know their scope of contribution. What do they bring to the table? What do they bring to the field every day? Even the athlete who doesn't get a lot of playing time, that is still really, really important, that they do have a scope of contribution that they have there. So I think coaches can be really good at that, and to helping them and to helping athletes be more resilient, especially if athletes respond in different ways, you know, whether they choke or not, and what emotions come out with them, because the tendency is emotions will drive first when some of the behavior is off on the field and the athlete, you know, feels that they screwed up. But if a coach can begin to see this and understand the player's story, what is it about this athlete? What is it about their story that they can understand, so they can help the athlete understand what the belief system is behind this? You know, and basically that's all about, is changing belief systems. I think of the old, and I'm dating myself, the old Journey song, "Don't Stop Believing," okay, it's a double negative, but the idea of belief, and what are those beliefs? So an athlete feels that they're not competent, and they have fear and anxiety because of that, or they don't have a coping plan. How can coaches help and support the athlete with that? That's hard to do, though, if you're working with 20 to 25 people out there on your team. But the more that coaches can see that, the more they can develop that vulnerability trust, and they can help that athlete work through that a little bit more.
And Nikki, I want you to feel free, please jump in at any time. I just had a follow-up question to that, because what you're saying, I think it kind of resonates, not just in sport, but in any realm of leadership, in business, nonprofit, whatever it would be. So what would be a good strategy for a leader to kind of be intentional and develop some of those individual relationships with players or employees or any other followers?
Sure. In my book, The Coaching Zone, some people have commented that this is not just about sports, it's about leadership overall. And I've come to realize that it does, unintentionally. I think one of the first things, and I talk about this in the book, is that coaches and leaders need to have a level of self-awareness. I take the work of Daniel Goleman, who is the emotional intelligence guru, and he talks about the focused leader, which has a focus on self, a focus on others, and a focus on the wider world. So I look at coaches focusing on themselves to a degree where they understand their own self-management, their own self-regulation, self-control. What are their stories? You know, what are the stories that come to life for them? What are their strengths? What are their shortcomings? Okay, and how do you put that together? And what is the purpose that the coach has when they work with individual athletes in the team? You know, what do I want for my athletes? What do I want from my athletes? And then really understanding too is, why do I coach in the first place? I think that helps to ground the coach more, to allow them to go to the next piece, which is leading and empowering athletes. And one of the, there's kind of a hitting the sweet spot between providing direction, but also empowering them. So if you're providing too much direction, you're micromanaging. If you're providing too much empowerment, everything's chaos there. So it's hitting that sweet spot of a coach knowing when to go and when to slow with direction in that. Okay, and I think that's really, really important to see. And then the third piece in there is basically coaches help to orchestrate or choreograph the team dance. And the team dance is literally the rhythm and flows of the team. And that changes from day to day, from game to game, from season to season. And to understand that and understand the role that the players have on the field, their scope of contribution that I talked about before. And this is critical, for leaders too. There's a book out called "There's No I in Team" that I cited the author to that in the book a little bit, because so many people use that cliche. Well, there is an I in team. That was the title of the book. There are people who say there's no I in team. Well, there is the individual. There's always an individual. Okay, but the thing is, well, what is it about the individual that we can value? What is it about the team that we value? And how do we hit the sweet spot between both of those areas? Focusing on, building the best individual, who then can become the best part of the jigsaw puzzle or the team, which also leads into the idea of culture and being able to understand the institutional memory of the organization. What is it about the culture of this organization or this team that goes? And then constantly, if teams stay the same and they don't change, then they get stale, whether it's business, school, education, or athletic. And so how can you actually hit the sweet spot with transformation? What are the things that we need to do to move on and to grow into things like that? So I tend to not look at either or situations. I tend to look at both and situations for coaches. And I find that the most effective coaches are those that are able to, as I say, hit the sweet spot in balancing those healthy tensions or polarities.
Nikki, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your book. Just give us an overview of it and maybe what your favorite part of the book is.
Well, in some ways, I talked a little about the overview and the three different pieces. I'm really excited. Here's a copy of the book right here, and I'm going to give a shameless plug. It's the actual official launch date is tomorrow. Okay, and I've got a lot of stuff up on social media. Been doing a lot of podcasts like this, and you can buy the book tomorrow on Kindle for $1.99. Okay, and what you do is you get also a bonus gift, which is a 47 exercises for coaches and athletes in the book that you can actually download as the bonus gift and print out to use as you go along there. I really, in my 45 years of coaching and also playing sports, I really found some interesting things when I interviewed around 50 or so coaches at all different levels: youth, high school, college, club, and professional. And then also with several sports psychologists. They all came up with some of the similar understandings about being effective, and it was about understanding themselves very well, okay, and becoming lifelong learners, so that they were most available to be out there with the athletes, and just as a story that I told earlier against Middlebury, I just that knowing that our stories really help to define how we operate at times, I think is very, very important. And that's that first part of the book, and the second part of the book talks about the leading and the empowering. And it also, I talk a lot in there about athletes and coaches being in the present moment. Okay, I know mindfulness is a term that's it's not it might be overused, but it should be, because I think that's one of the sweet spots that's missing, with many athletes. And I talk a lot about how do you build confidence in athletes, through, getting them to look at the things that they've mastered in the past, and then how do they, transfer that over to a new skill, and then how do they vicariously learn through role models out there and getting good feedback. That's important. But as two sports psychologists, Amy Balsell, who was one of my doctoral students at Boston University way back, she's out of the Boston area, and Mitch Green, who's a sports psychologist out of the Philadelphia area, they talk about this notion of courage over confidence. So sometimes it's really hard to say to an athlete, you need to be confident all the time to do this. Okay, there's so many different things going on, okay, that are getting in our heads. To wrap right around the confidence is hard to do. But then what you do is you go to the other C, which is courage. And courage is all about the ability to know that you have fear going on, but you're going to suck it up and say, okay, I'm going to move forward anyways. I've done the body of evidence of work to be a good athlete, okay? You know, I've done that work there, okay? And I'm taking good care of myself. I've done this before. There's no reason I cannot do this again. And I go out there. And I think coaches can really, who really can see if an athlete doesn't have the confidence at that time, that they can help to be courageous and have the coaches saying, hey, just like my father was, I'm here for you. Okay, let's go. I think you can do it. You know, let's go for it. And then when athletes succeed at that, the feeling is unbelievable. You know, it's just like, you know, it's like, you know, in many ways, sports is, you know, trying to go out there and get a sense of feeling complete, you know, when you're out there. And when that happens, the feeling is amazing. But sometimes it takes that courage to be able to go out there to make that happen. So, you know, I talk, and that's one of the things I learned from several of the different sports psychologists, you know, that I talked about in there. And of course, the third part was about talking about the team and that teams change all the time. And I was really fascinated about pep talks and how coaches give pep talks and you know, what are the really important components of a pep talk, that, you know, they have to be, you know, in many ways direction giving. Okay, they have to be meaningful, and they have to bring some level of empathy in there. And I was never, as a coach, I was never you know, a blustery, go out there and win it for the Gipper type of rah-rah guy. But occasionally I'd get amped up with that. But I remember when I was coaching lacrosse at Culver, you know, back in the early 2000s, and I demoted myself after 2004. We brought another coach in, and the team got really, really good. I'm not sure what that says about me, but anyways, in 2003, we're playing in the state semifinals down in Indianapolis, and we're losing 6-0 at halftime. And it wasn't for a fault of us not playing well. We just couldn't put the ball in the net. Their goalie was coming up big, and we were missing some of our shots too. So, you know, I went to the team. I said, this is going to sound cliche, guys, but look, first of all, we're down 6-0. We're playing okay. We just need to put the ball in the net. Okay. Let's go out there and pretend the game's 0-0. And, you know, a lot of times coaches will say that. And so I said, let's try it out. Let's see if it does. And if we score the first goal of the third period, we're up 1-0. Let's see how that goes. So we got back there, and I kind of said a quick prayer as the face off of the third period. And we did score the first goal within the first minute of the third period. And so we went up 1-0, and everybody's, you know, well, that's nice. Then we scored the second. Then we scored the third. So we're down 6-3, but we're thinking we're leading 3-0. They call a timeout. We got the momentum. Our team is going ballistic. We got it up to 6-5. And we ended up losing the game 8-7. But what a shift. And that was this idea of belief, and be able to communicate about the belief and the core values of the team there. And not all those players, some of those players graduated, but we had a similar team the following year when we went to the state finals in Indiana in 2004. And we were playing a team that had beat us by 10 goals during the season. And I was being optimistic and thinking I didn't tell the players this, but we'd probably lose by maybe 3 or 4 goals. But I just hoped we'd make a good performance out there. Now, of course, I didn't say this to the players. And their team went down and scored in the first minute of play. And the player who scored came in front of our bench and did a dance in front of us. So he taunted us. And that's one of the things that, and Nikki knows this from going to Culver, you don't do that if you're at Culver, and you don't do that to in the sport. You know, it's not part of the sport. You know, you gotta, you know, the spirit of the game. So I call a timeout, and I'm a little riveted at this point. And my captain, Jack Parchman, comes by, and you know, he goes, "Coach, we have the timeout. You don't have to come into the cuddle at all." I go, "What? Don't worry about it. We got it." Okay. Well, they go out, they come on there, and they're very animated in the huddle. They come back out, and we're leading the game 12-1 at halftime. We ended up winning the state championship. But it was the belief system right there, and finally said, it's not necessarily not in my house, you don't do that to us, but it was the belief that, you know, we can actually do this, and we want to do it right. And they went out and they did it right. You know, I mean, and I think, is that going to happen all the time? No. You know, I mean, can teams that are really, really strong not come up short? Of course. And they can have the best sports psych and collective confidence and collective psychological capital going, okay? But the thing is, if they have that and they're working at it, more often than not, they're going to find the joy and satisfaction out there. And that can actually contribute to W's over time. So that's what I try to kind of emphasize in the book is for coaches, you know, this goes way beyond the X's and O's. I think it goes beyond doing sports psych with the athletes. It's about coaches understanding their own psychology and learning more about how they can make the effort and make application so that they can work with their athletes. Bob Quinn, who wrote a great book, he was from the University of Michigan, and called Building the Bridges You Walk on It. He says, when we change ourselves, we change how other people see us and how they respond to us. When we change ourselves, we change the world. And that's living in the fundamental state of leadership. And it really is. So the coach's ability to make changes over time, you know, and to be able to really understand their players out there really bodes well. And that's the emphasis that I put on this book there. And I've just begun to find out more so that it has so many applications to business and to education, also in leadership.
I think that was the question I wanted to ask when you told the story about your captain. And he said, Coach, I got it. Don't worry about it. Like, in your opinion, then, what's the point of sport? You know, there seems like there's such a push for specialization and professionalization, I guess, even at a youth level. But, you know, that story right there with that captain who learned those skills and led that team and got them fired up and came back and won, that's going to carry with him forever on how to be a good leader and how to take charge. You know, to me, that's what I think the beauty in sport is. Would you agree?
I totally would. I saw on social media recently a picture of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 7 foot, whatever, and John Wooden was coaching him at UCLA. Then it showed Jabbar later when Wooden was in his 80s and holding hands, and basically where Wooden helped to lead Jabbar, then Jabbar was holding hands and leading along Wooden. And it was just really, really powerful, because I think that's what to make a difference in somebody else's life and to get them to grow with the life skills. Jack ended up going to Air Force Academy, was in Air Force intelligence for a variety of years, got his MBA at Chicago Booth, and now he's an investment banker there, and he's on the board of directors for the Owls Youth Lacrosse League in Chicago. You know, so that's Jack. You know, Jack had a lot together anyways beforehand, but allowing that situation to happen, where he took charge and made that happen, was really, really important. And I think that's important to do across the board, okay? Because in many ways, the coach, I am not the main actor in the story. It's the player and the players, okay? They're the main actors. Okay, I can help be a choreographer or orchestra leader, okay? But the bottom line is they are in the trenches doing the work out there and allowing for them to make mistakes, to screw up, but also to flourish and to grow and to ask questions of them, so how it's going. So it becomes their team and their game.
So good. I love it. Nikki, any other questions that you have?
No, I don't have any other questions.
All right. Well, John, I really appreciate your time. I thought this was excellent. And, I can't wait to share this with my class. And I'll ask both of you guys if it's all right with you. We also have the Trine Center for Sports Studies here on campus, and we do a bi-weekly podcast. And we've had some speakers from the leadership side. I thought you brought up some really good things that maybe they haven't touched on in the past, especially regarding like talking about courage and over, oh my gosh.
Confidence.
Confidence. Thank you. Sorry, I had a brain fart there for a second. I thought that was real good. Would you guys be okay if we put this up on the podcast next week, next Friday?
Sure. I'd love for you to do that. And please, when you put that up there, if you, Professor Potter, Nikki, if you can put that up on LinkedIn or other social media to have it out there, because I'd like to share with my following the opportunity that I had to speak with you today. Yeah. Anytime.
Absolutely. We'll do that. And we'll have a link. We'll link to the book and everything too. So it'll be a nice way to kind of promote some of what you're doing.
Yeah, and also, Professor Pod, I'm to the point in my career now, I really want to give back. And, you know, as COVID begins to recede and when outside people are allowed back in, I've already been double vaccinated, but when people are allowed to come back on campus that are not necessarily employees or faculty or staff or students there, I'd love to come out and speak in your class in person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have you. We'll definitely do that. We love to have guest speakers in. So we'll do that. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn and we'll stay in touch. Absolutely.
That's great. Good. Well, thanks so much, Professor Pod. Nikki, thanks so much for orchestrating this. It's exciting.
Of course.
And you folks have been really an important part of launch week for me. You know, really great. I love talking about this, and I want to kind of get the word out there to coaches and to leaders.
Absolutely. Thanks, John and Nikki. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. See you guys.
Yeah. Bye-bye.